Okay, so here's two examples from page 235, numbers 10 and 13. Let's number 10 first. A company has two manufacturing plants with daily production levels of 5x plus 11 items and 2x minus 3 items, respectively, where x represents the minimum quantity. Okay, I don't really understand what that means, but that's okay. I'm just going to keep going. The first plant produces how many more? So, how many more items daily than the second plant? Okay, how many more? So, the first plant is to say the first one is how many more than the second one means I'm going to subtract the first one minus the second one to figure out how many more. Like if I told you the first one um, produces 11 items and the second one produces 3 items, how many more is that? It would be 8, right? Because you would just subtract. But it's just more complicated than that. So the first one is 5x plus 11, whereas the second one is 2x minus 3, and we're subtracting these things to find out how many more. Okay, so we don't, we have parentheses to show the distributed property, but there's nothing really distributed here except for a 1. So there's like the invisible 1 out here. So 1 times 5x is 5x, 1 times 11 is 11. So it doesn't really change anything when I get rid of those parentheses. But over here, if I put the invisible 1, then I realize I really have a negative 1. So when I distribute, I would have times negative 2, and I would have negative 3. So I could do it that way. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is I'm subtracting everything from the second plant. I'm subtracting all of that from the first one. So I'm subtracting 2x. But I'm also subtracting the subtraction of 3. Well, that's really confusing. So inside this here, when I go subtract and subtract, there's two ways of looking at it. One, if I subtracting and subtracting, that's double negative, that becomes add. If that makes sense to you, go with that. If you're a little confused, remember we can always do this. We can always change subtract to add and make this a negative 1, and subtract to add and make this a negative 3. Okay, and then we're only working with addition and negatives, and then it makes a little bit more sense. So I'm going to do negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. Negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3. So I'm really adding 3. So there you go. So that make more sense. Remember that was an adding a negative 2 because we said that. So I can either remember how I made that subtract. I can go add a negative, and I've already fixed it. So I can bounce back and forth between that rule. And I'm going to do that because I'm going to combine these like terms. So I'm going to put 5x plus negative 2x, well, that's 3x, and 11 plus 3, that's 14. So this might be a little confusing because there's all these subtracting and negatives, but that is the simplified version. Okay, so in this problem, if you would just pause now and read over the problem, it's kind of complicated. But it says, write and simplify an expression to represent how much more Jackson spent. So Jackson spent more than Tim. So how much more? Well, I would subtract them to find out how much more he spent. So let me first write an expression for Jackson. So he spent $7.65 on watermelon and 5 pounds of cherries. Well, 5 pounds isn't money. I can't add those together. But since I know that the pounds cost a certain amount, if I multiply, if P represents the price per pound, so P isn't pounds, P is the price in dollars per pound. So P is a dollar amount, like $2 per pound or $10 per pound. So 5 times the dollars would give me money. So now I can add those together. So that's how much Jackson spent. So I'm going to write an expression for how much Tim spent. See if you can do the same. I'm going to do $2.45 for the pineapple and 4 pounds that cost P dollars per pound. So I'm going to subtract everything in Tim's expression away. So I have to subtract the $2.45 and I need to subtract the 4p. So now I'm going to simplify. So I changed subtract to add in the second number to its opposite. So now I can subtract. I can rearrange these. I can combine like terms. So when I combine like terms, I have $5.20 plus whatever they're paying per pound